Welcome to Secured with Dr. KJ, the podcast where we break down cybersecurity, the technologies driving it, and the companies shaping our digital future. I'm your host, Dr. Kenneth Johnson, cybersecurity leader, technologist, and strategist. Cybersecurity isn't just an IT concern, it's a business imperative. Each episode, we'll explore key topics like cloud security, zero trust, AI-driven defense, and more. We'll assess how tech leaders are adapting, where they need to improve, and what it takes to stay ahead of evolving threats. This podcast features expert insights from security professionals, industry leaders, and technologists, offering real-world solutions to modern cybersecurity challenges. Whether you're a business leader, security expert, or just curious about how technology keeps us safe, this podcast is for you. Subscribe and join the conversation as we explore cybersecurity's biggest challenges, securing tomorrow, one episode at a time. Mark Simos is the lead cybersecurity architect for Microsoft, where he leads the development of a security architecture framework that helps guide security modernization at customers by providing reference strategies, architectures, roadmaps, and plans to implement security best practices across IT, OT, IoT, AI, and more. In addition to his Microsoft role, Mark is also author of the Zero Trust Playbook series and actively contributes to open standards on security. He chairs the Security Forum and Zero Trust working groups at the Open Group that have produced the Zero Trust Commandments, Security Principles for Architecture, Zero Trust Reference Model, and other standards. Mark, welcome to Secured with Dr. KJ. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, man. Great to be here.
Yeah. No, truly appreciate it. Let's just jump right into question one. Is, at a high level, what does zero trust mean to you? And why is it more than just a buzzword in today's security landscape?
That's a good question. So the way I think about zero trust is it's actually remarkably simple. It's how to do security correctly minus one false assumption that really, really hurt cybersecurity in its, first couple of decades. And that bad assumption is that, hey, if we put up a firewall and, a solid network perimeter, then we can keep the threats out of the threats out and protect the assets that are in it. And then we don't have to do a lot more work, quite frankly. It's sort of the implied next step on it, right?
Right.
And that's all zero trust is okay, well, what if we take out that false assumption because it doesn't work? Between phishing and cred theft, they get in. And between cloud and mobile and everything else and AI, the data gets out and the assets get out. So if we take that assumption away, how do we do security? So it's a really simple concept, but it is extraordinarily complex in execution because that shortcut kept you from looking deeply at business processes for data, at applications and how they're built. And there's a whole bunch of things that got shortcut, and we'll do that later. Oh, that's important, but we're not going to actually do anything, right? There's a whole lot of stuff that just didn't get done that, when you go down the zero trust road, it's like, oh, we actually need to solve those problems instead of deferring them and kicking the can down the road. So that's what zero trust is to me.
No, I really love it. And basically what I'm hearing is you need to not trust, but you need to verify. You need to verify who people are when they're accessing your resources. And so how are you seeing customers really implement that zero trust in their organizations?
Yeah. That's a good question. So like ultimately trust is expensive, right? It feels free when you've got it, right? It's easy and it's kind of invisible like the oxygen around you. Mm-hmm. But when you don't have it, it gets real expensive. And so, essentially having to build that trust and do that explicit verification of trust is a Microsoft principle. It also shows up in the open group stuff is really very central to it, which is, just because you're on the network doesn't mean you're magically safe, right? Which is that core flawed assumption. And so, what we found is there was sort of this journey of like, why would we do this? Because again, everybody around you, peer group said, network perimeter good, IDS, IPS, firewall, and SIM that looks at those logs and then blocks IPs. That's good, right? Well, everybody said it was good, but it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, there's a few people like the Jericho Forum at the Open Group and some others that have been like sounding the alarm on this for some time. But what we found is that there's sort of two different journeys. One is the sort of why, what, how, which is what the heck is this zero trust and why would I care, right? And then once people go, oh, then there's so how do I do this? And very specifically, what do I do first? Because there's no way I can do everything, right?
Right.
So there's sort of like that why, what, how journey. But then, the technical journey of what we see people do when they sort of take a rational approach is, and this is why there's so much confusion with zero trust being an identity thing. And we can thank a few, won't be named vendors that said, you buy zero trust in a 19-inch rack product, right? Or an SaaS service or whatever.
Right.
But identity was the first crisis, which is, hey, the stuff is out there on the cloud. It's out there on the mobile devices. And they don't have to go through the firewall in our Active Directory logon to get it. Uh-oh. So that was like the first crisis, and that's why there was some confusion that zero trust is identity. And then zero trust does influence and radically transform how you do identity and adaptive access and all the like. But it's the first step. It's not the only step. And, because security operations, okay, well, the attackers can attack all these things. We need to detect, respond, recover wherever they are, inside, outside the perimeter. And we need to have asset-specific ways of doing that to an endpoint, regardless of where it is, an app, wherever it is, an identity, wherever it is, a cloud service, which is generally in the cloud. And so, like, how do you do that? And, that got termed EDR and XDR. It didn't get the zero trust term, but it's the same thing, right? And then you're applying a lot of that same set of thinking of like, okay, if they can get in, how do I rethink my infrastructure? How do I think my development process? How do I think about how I do asset management and IT and all those kind of things, and OT and IoT? So we tend to see that identity, then SOC, and then, as people move to the cloud and touch, the vast majority of their assets for, cloud or AI transformation, that's generally when they start to apply better security practices if they're doing it right.
No, I really like that. And so how does Gen AI play into the zero trust architecture?
So I actually put out a white paper on this partnership with our marketing team at Microsoft, and it's actually the term we use was symbiotic, right? It's a mutually beneficial relationship because AI is accelerating a lot of complex tasks, right? And it's not automating the same things that we're used to, right? It's not like it's replacing machine learning. It's actually doing different tasks like writing scripts and reverse engineering scripts and stuff like that. So it's automating manual tasks, but it's doing a different set of tasks than we've ever seen. And so there's definitely like that. The same kinds of things like those sort of information worker tasks that we would see across any industry, any job, any profession, that's also happening in security. So it's an accelerator for security and therefore zero trust and all the modernization stuff you're trying to do. The other thing that we found is, when you look at that core essence of zero trust of, are we doing this on a network perimeter basis, or are we doing it from assume breach, assume compromise type of, it's an open network. We're still going to keep the firewalls up, but treat it like an open network and protect it like it's an open network.
Right.
That when you do that, there's no way a firewall can ever protect AI because it's an app, it's a service, and it's a data generation and analysis technology. And so you need an asset-centric, a data-centric, a system-centric approach to security, a zero trust approach. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, like, you can't protect your AI and really the data underneath it without a zero trust approach, like, just by definition. And so very much mutually beneficial. Well. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I really love that. And so when you think identity, and, it's really often described as the new security perimeter. So how critical is identity management to a successful zero trust strategy? I think he kind of alluded to it, but can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in fact, there's an Oprah joke in there. There's an interesting dynamic because when you lose the inside outside as the only differentiator you need, right, of the classic security approach, You need to give everything an identity. Your data needs an identity. Your applications need an identity. Your users, your devices, because you need to apply policy and you need to monitor things and you need to identify relationships between them to see, should this thing actually access this thing to do this, right? And you can't do that without having like the nouns and the subjects and the objects. It doesn't work. And so you have to have this adaptive policy that's able to measure risk and adapt and, based on threat factors and, oh, your device is compromised right now. So, you can't touch anything, right? Those kind of things. But in order to do that, the device needs an identity needs an identity, data needs an identity, the asset that you're talking to, the applications, et cetera. And so it's like that Oprah thing of like, you get an identity, you get an identity, you get an identity. Everybody gets an identity, right?
Right.
And so there's this sort of digital identity piece, but then you also have to update the policy engine that makes those, access decisions, which is typically part of an identity system, also sometimes part of networking systems. But they're both access technologies, but that access control engine, the adaptive access, also has to be upgraded to do the dynamic policy to take advantage of those. So there's two major transformations. And I think we put our LinkedIn post on that with some of the proposed draft text we're putting out for the open group to define, hey, what does a modern capability look like that has all this stuff built in and consent and all this other kind of stuff? Because, nowadays, it used to be like which users get to access this app and data, and that's still there. Right. But then, okay, which applications get to know about me as a user, right? That's like a whole new question that we now have to deal with consent. And there's sort of the technical part of it. And then there's the, and the privacy part of it. And, which regulators need to know what about what these, identities are compromised. And so there's like this whole consent thing in there that gets woven in. So we wanted to sort of define what does good look like in this new world.
No, I really love that as well. And so as I was doing some research on my own, and maybe, hey, tell me if I'm wrong or not as I'm looking at my research. But, so I was thinking about the entire zero trust digital estate. And so I saw an architecture that it broke out the identities, the endpoints, your threat protection, network, data, apps, and infrastructure. All of that to me sounds like, hey, we need something at each stop along the way to ensure that we're verifying, we're understanding who's accessing what data, right? To also then have those policies that are coming down, making sure those access policies to ensure that we're comprehensively covering a zero trust type of strategy or implementing that type of strategy. Is that sort of how we should go down and how we should look at this? Is a segment by segment, or is this more of a broad thing that you're talking about here?
It's both, right? Because there's a truth that security is part of everyone's job, and we're covering the open group. Okay, so that's great. That's a great sentence to say, but what does it mean, right? Right. And so we're defining the roles and responsibilities, from a board and a CEO all the way down to like a SOC analyst, an IT engineer, a lawyer, et cetera. Like how does security change your job, right? And that's also true of the technology elements as well, because a container can be attacked, a server can be attacked, an app can be attacked, an API can be attacked, a user endpoint can be attacked, a mobile device can be attacked, like an identity, all these things, the data can be attacked. And so the reality is you need to bake security in, and that's part of what the people that own those assets need to do. Because if you own the business process or company as like a CFO for accounts payable, accounts receivable, well, you have to authorize and make it important to fix those processes for a business email compromise, because they're exploiting those processes to convince people to send money. They're not exploiting a technology when they call up on the phone and say, hey, can you send money to this? It's urgent. I'm the CEO. That's the processes and the people, right? And so, from that perspective, you definitely have to look at it as, as you said, the big picture, like everything and every person has to be security aware and doing their part. It's not 100% of their job, but it's, anywhere between 1 and 20 and 30, 50%, depending on the role. And then the technology also have to have the security built in, because the last thing you want to do is be trying to protect this thing when it was designed without protections, and then it's baked and the developers are gone. Right? Like that is the worst time to be trying to make something actually protected and secure to protect the X $1 million asset of the company.
Right. No, it makes sense. So when you think about zero trust, it's definitely a framework as I'm understanding a little bit more from you, but, and it's, but some people want to productize it. And so how do we truly ensure alignment across, the teams? So we think about IT and security and compliance teams and even leadership. How do we help them understand and work together when executing this zero trust strategy?
Very good question. And that could be a very long answer. I'll make it as short as I can. It's about looking at it as a team, right? Because like you look at a sports team, even people that are playing football, the quarterback does a very, very different job than the receiver does, than any of the defenders do. Like, I mean, you're talking about, and this is where my sports ignorance just bit me, right?
I think you're doing
come
well
up with
so
a
far.
position. I was like, nose tackle, is that right? But at the end of the day, right, you've got to recognize that, okay, everybody's got a different job and everybody's got to be good at that job. And then how do we work together? So how do I get to know them and how do I support them, and vice versa? What do I need from you? And we've got to ask those questions and work through that and recognize, we're all part of the same team, right? Because, keeping with the football analogy, defense doesn't score points except in extremely rare conditions, right? Correct. You don't make money on security per se. What you do is you make sure you're not losing so much money that it doesn't matter how many damn points that the business put on the board, right? And we've got to recognize that we are the defenders. We're part of the same team. We have a different job, and that we have to support them, and that we have to be good at our job, right? And so it's really about like seeing ourselves that way and saying, okay, what does the finance team, what does the legal team, the HR team, what does the physical security team do for a living? How do they think about things? How do I work with them, right? And so this is very much a task for the leaders of the security team, is to build those relationships, build those contacts, have their managers and their leaders start to understand that and start getting that knowledge into their teams, because security, even though it's been standalone for a long time, it needs to be an integral part of it, because it's not about, hey, we have the security team off to the side operating independently and they do their own GRC and their own this and their own that. That doesn't work, right? Because all anybody does is basically say, hey, something went wrong, blame security. Well, did they have anything to do with the decision-making process? I don't care. Just blame the security team, right? That doesn't happen with the lawyers. That doesn't happen with HR.
Right.
If someone screws up and they do it in an HR way, I'm not going to go into details. You don't blame the HR person. If someone breaks the law, it's their fault, not the legal people. The legal people gave them bad advice. It's on them, right? And so it's really important to view ourselves as security professionals as enablers. How do I act like a good lawyer, a good HR person, a good finance person? I'm here to make you successful. I'm here to help you avoid stepping in a pile of goo that you don't want to step in, right? Like that is what my job is as a security person. But in order to do so, I need to know, what route are you taking, right? And that's the way we have to like look at the work.
Yeah. So basically what you're telling me is teams need to communicate. Open communication, having the conversation and asking the tough questions makes all the difference in being able to implement a zero trust type of strategy across the entire organization.
Absolutely. Yep.
100%. That wraps up another insightful episode of Secured with Dr. KJ. A big thank you to Mark Simos for joining us and sharing his deep expertise on zero trust, cybersecurity architecture, and what it truly takes to shift from a legacy thinking to modern proactive security strategies. From aligning business and security goals to breaking down the practical steps for zero trust implementation, Mark reminded us that it isn't just a framework, it is a mindset shift. If you found this conversation valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Secured with Dr. KJ. We've got more security leaders and real-world insights coming your way. Until next time, we're securing tomorrow, one episode at a time.